What are some of the challenges that you face when you speak in public? Remember, public speaking is any time you speak in front of an audience of one or more. Anytime you speak in front of an audience of one or more, you're speaking in public. So what are some of those challenges that you face?
We talk, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, knowing your audience, you know, and the format. I've spoken at a lot of different denomination churches, and knowing what's appropriate can be a challenge to navigate.
Mm-hmm.
I've done it fairly successfully, but sometimes I have to throw out my notes and just go.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So knowing your audience and the situation, we're going to talk about how to identify that, or what to do. What are the questions that you ask to determine that? What else? Margaret, you had some.
Yeah, we both said that when we get ready to do some kind of speaking, that we feel like we have to write it out in detail to be comfortable.
So
I do that too.
Script.
Yeah.
Script versus notes. Okay. What else, Cecilia?
The challenge to me is that I'll be able to touch the head and the heart. Because I may be just talking, and after that, it's nothing. But I should challenge them with what I'm going to say.
One of my favorite professors at the Harvard Kennedy School says leadership is about touching the head, the heart, and the hands, and the feet, and the action, which I really appreciate.
The whole person.
Excellent. What else? What other challenges, Patricia?
Culture of the people I'm talking with, because culture difference. For example, the protocol we have in Nigeria when you're addressing an audience is very different from the protocol here. So knowing the culture.
Exactly, absolutely. Rahana.
So I think my challenge, and I was talking to you about this, Margaret, was that I need to have like a piece of paper in front of me. Just like I have to be prepared. I can't just like talk at the top of my head. I know a lot of people do it, but I mean, I look down and look back up, but I need to like read it through beforehand to like I have to be really prepared. If not, then I kind of like stutter or freeze at the stage.
Okay, great. What else? Yvonne.
Freeze up.
The faces. I'm overwhelmed with all the faces.
Too many faces.
So just a note, maybe increase your volume just so that Rehana can hear you.
Right. Speak up so that Rahana can hear you. You've got too many faces in the audience, which leads to nervousness.
You remove the face.
Remove the face. No. Or connect even more with them. We'll talk about some tips.
I've always struggled with eye contact. Like, I can speak fairly well in a group, but what makes me nervous is when I have to look at their faces and make that connection. I don't know, because whenever I look at someone's face, it breaks my concentration. So
we have to be able to think and make eye contact at the same time.
The other thing we talked about was that, you know, if you don't have time for preparation, sometimes you're asked to speak spontaneously when you're not prepared. And so,
right, impromptu speaking is its own special skill. Zubaida.
The challenge is first is language. Like Joseph and Olga and myself, we talked that if we speak in our own native language, we're so confident. Even myself is very confident.
Right.
I don't need to write any speech notes or anything. I get this done. And soon I know the audiences, everybody, and we just can focus on it's just fantastic. Yeah, we reach what we want to do. That's no problem. And
1 minute. Yes. Keep going.
okay. All right. Okay. Another thing is, you know, we present in other languages. I'm saying other languages because we speak many different languages.
Of course.
Other language, again, it depends on context and situation, audiences as well.
Yes.
Some, like for example, if I speak in Chinese, I'm very confident again. Although it's not my native, but I'm confident because I know the audience, I know what they want to listen, so it's fine. But when you speak in English, it's terrifying. Because one, from Olga's point of view, said, you know, when people at the beginning get nervous, from the beginning, You know, look at audience, so many people.
Right.
First 1, 2, 3 minutes, we knows. And we forget what we were, it scripts
Right.
everything.
Right.
And what we were trying to say, we just forget it's confusion there.
Okay, we'll talk about some techniques for dealing with that.
That's the thing that happens
Okay,
to us.
okay. I'm gonna pause here. We're gonna go to Ruhana. It's Ruhana, right?
Hannah.
Yeah.
Rehana.
Rehana.
Yeah.
Rehana. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I think someone mentioned the whole spontaneous thing, but I know like what I find difficult on panel discussions, when you have to, like when you're discussing a topic, but you can't have anything prepared, so you need to be like when you have to challenge the other person, I find that like a little bit hard, because you have to think at the top of your head, you don't have any statistics or any like evidence in front of you, so you have to have that knowledge stored
Or
somewhere.
you have to have prepared it in advance so that it's ready.
Yeah, but what if it's like a question or a topic that's not relevant or that's like a little bit out of the box or a little bit out of the discussion?
Right.
Then you're like, I don't know, I guess you're stuck a little bit.
There's some graceful ways to move on and answer. Well, that's not the area of focus, but I'd be happy to get back to you with those statistics, and then but what we're really here to discuss is, and then we can reframe it to the main messages that you have. We'll talk about that. Yes.
The another one that maybe is also in the language is about questions. Because for me sometimes, okay, the questions come and maybe I cannot understand the question and maybe I like just waiting for the question. Where is your question, guy?
That never happens, ever.
I try to, to say again the question to see if I understood the question, or to say, okay, could you repeat your question, please, or something like that. And sometimes it's also because of the language.
Right. Right, absolutely, and being able to push back on
Yes.
that. Okay, very healthy list of challenges. These are very frequent topics that I hear people say they've dealt with, they've faced. It doesn't matter where we're from, we all face the same challenges, no matter what language we're speaking. Do I write it out or do I just have notes? How do I speak off the cuff in that language or in another language? And I'm going to weave in answers to many of these questions. We may not have as much time. Towards the end, if we can, I'll address this as well. It's a more specific focus on public speaking. I want to give you a broad foundation for what structure you can apply every single time you have to prepare to speak. The first thing we'll look at is the... Yes.
Can we add the time?
What about
Because
the time?
Time
They
pressure.
say to you, you have 5 minutes to speak. Like, for example, sometimes you prepare for a public speech, like, let's say 10 pages, or you know what you want to say, but then they say to you 15 minutes, and then they say, oh, we are in a time restriction, can you make it 10 minutes?
Oh, sure.
So what are the things to choose and to leave and,
Excellent. What I'm going to tell you right now is going to help you with that. But it's a definitely very realistic situation that happens.
Sometimes they
many
say
times.
to you have 3 minutes.
Sure, this matter.
No.
If you can, okay.
Yeah,
So
but I
let's
have
focus on the
skill.
structure,
Yeah.
and then I'll show you how you can use that in this situation. So in public speaking, there are two areas. There's the content, what you say, and there's delivery, how you say it. And both are equally important. It depends on the audience you're speaking to, which one you have to pay more attention to, but you need both to be impactful. And we start with the content, because you have to know what you're going to say before you think about how you deliver it. And the more connected you are with the content, the more authentic the delivery is, because you're not faking it. It's an authentic representation of the content. So let's start with the content. No matter what length of the speech, no matter what the situation, no matter what the language is, you always ask 3 questions as you're preparing to write a speech. This is not the outline of the speech, this is the strategy for the writing. The first question is, who's your audience? As Patricia and Rabia both have talked about, knowing who your audience is. Now, how do you find that out? It's not simply saying, okay, who are they? Who are the people? It's asking, what language do they speak? It could be foreign language, but it could also be, do they understand the language of my industry? Do they understand the acronyms that I'm using? Do they understand the cultural references I put in my speech? Do they understand the humor that I'm using? You look at a word like development. Development has at least three different meanings according to your industry. Development could be real estate development, it could be software development, or it could be fundraising, depending on your industry. So knowing who your audience is helps you understand, will they get your subject? What language do they speak? So that you can write your speech in a language that they understand. Because if you don't speak in a way that they understand, then you can't persuade them to take action. It's also important to understand when you ask who your audience is, how they feel about your subject. Are you talking to a group of people that's going to embrace you, or do they want to push you back? And understanding that helps you choose the right language to use. This is critical before you write any word of the speech, thinking through who that audience is. And you may not know who that audience is, so how do you find out who can give you information on that audience? So that you don't walk into a situation where you have to throw your speech out because you wrote it for the wrong audience. That's the first question. The second question you ask is, what's your goal? What do you want people to do as a result of hearing you speak? Every speech is an opportunity to influence people's behavior, to change their thoughts, to change their actions. As Cecilia said, to touch their head and their heart, and then hopefully their hands. And the more focused you are on the purpose of that speech, the more effective it will be. How many of you have sat through a speech having no idea what it was about or where it was going? A lot. That's because the speaker didn't take the time to think about what's the goal? What do I want people to do? Because the more focused you are on the goal, the more structure you have in your speech towards that goal. A speech about everything is a speech about nothing. So taking the time to focus. The third question is critical. And the third question is one that we tend to overlook. The third question is, why you? Why do you care? Why do you care about the subject that you're speaking about? Why do you care about your audience? When you answer that question, you connect with your sense of purpose around why you do what you do. And you give yourself permission to put that in the speech. And in doing so, you become so much more authentic and so much more powerful. When I work with salespeople, I tell them that their authentic enthusiasm for what they're selling is the best sales pitch that they can come up with. It's not trying to push something onto someone. It's about sharing your enthusiasm and knowing that that's going to affect other people. So now I want you to answer that question, why you? Take a minute, and with the people that you were talking with before, answer, if you were going to give a speech, it doesn't matter on the subject, why do you do what you do? In one sentence, what is that sense of purpose? Answer it in one sentence. Take a minute. And second question.
Why do you do what you do?
I can't hear you.
Why do you do what you do? Did you hear?
Yeah, I can hear now. Why do you have heard her? Why do you do what you do? I didn't hear you. I guess because like I enjoy it and I want to make a difference.
You enjoy it? What else?
I want to make a difference.
Make a
And
difference.
it's something like
I'm going to keep pushing you. Why do you want to make a difference?
I guess I want to like, that's really extended. So I want to help people, I guess, or help people, help have voices heard that are unheard or that can't be heard.
Okay, so help people that otherwise wouldn't be heard, that you can be
Yeah.
their voice.
And also try to influence, like, I guess it depends on the situation, but try to influence, like, policy at the highest level so you can, you know, well, I guess that's making a difference too.
So help people and affect policy.
Yeah. Which in turn also makes a difference.
Okay, let's come back together. Okay, come back together. Okay, getting your exercise and kneeling. Why do you do what you do? Does anyone want to share? Robbie?
To give, my goal is to really give people a voice, to encourage people to use their voices.
To give people a voice. What else?
My goal is educating my people, but I'm very passionate about that advocacy because I don't wish to happen what happened to my people.
So you don't want what happens to your people to happen to anyone else? Cecilia?
Why me? Because I feel I have a mission from God to talk about the dignity, the human dignity.
These are very powerful motivators. And they also help overcome nervousness. Because what I do before every single presentation, and I did it just now in the bathroom before coming in here, is I look in the mirror and I remind myself why I do what I do. I say to myself, you have something so valuable to others. You're going to help others be even more effective in their voice, in their work, and you're going to be that voice that someone needs to hear today. That's what I tell myself. And all of a sudden, when I walk into the room, I'm not nervous about, well, what are they going to think about me, because it's not about me. It's about my message. And I become a vessel for the message that I want to deliver. And once I redirect the focus away from me towards the message and the audience, then all of a sudden, I'm on a mission. And my nervousness falls away. It doesn't go away completely. I'm always nervous before every presentation. But what it means is that I care about doing a good job and I don't let the nerves control me. So those are the three questions. Who's your audience? What's your goal? Why you? You can answer those questions in 5 minutes if you have to. And in those situations, Rada, where you've prepared 30 minutes and you walk in and they say, I'm so sorry, we're running late. Can you take 5 minutes? Can you do it in 5 minutes? You ask yourself the three questions. Okay, who's the audience? What's my goal? Why do I care about this? And then from that, you can figure out what's your message. What's one message that you need to impart? When you have to cut it down, that's what happens. You cut it down so that you focus on one message. That's the process I go through, not only for any speech, but any conversation I'm going to have with someone, because that helps center me. Then I can start to go through the writing process. Now, yesterday you talked about the writing process as it relates to a story. That was something to be read. But today we'll talk about how do you write in a way that's going to be heard, which is very different. I can always tell when people have written something to be read and not to be heard because they use big words like moreover or nonetheless. Things like, we don't use words like that in our normal language. So the first step in writing, when you look at the writing process, is writing it to be heard and not to be read.
And that was something that Chad said yesterday, if I can interject.
Please do.
He said, you know, don't write your story, show someone your story.
Exactly. I go through a process. I'll share with you what my process is. You may have your own process, and that's fine. It's important to have a process. If I'm writing something for the first time, I answer the three questions: who's my audience, what's my goal, why me? Then I write out what my main message is in one sentence. What's my message? Yeah, the three questions. Who's your audience? What's your goal? And then why you? Why you? Then I'm able to look at the writing process, starting with your main message. If someone were to leave your speech and get into the elevator and run into Margaret, and Margaret would say, oh, I missed Patricia's speech. Can you tell me what she said? Can Cecilia say in one sentence, oh, Patricia spoke about this, about the importance of accounting. Whatever that speech was about, can you say it in one sentence? That's your main message. The more concise it is, the more concise your speech will be. Then, what I do, if I don't know the subject, I write the speech out. I might write it word for word, or I might write it in bullet points. It depends on how well I know the subject. When I speak in another language, I write it out word for word to start with. Because I know from experience, it's really hard to make things up in front of an audience in another language. So I'll write it out word for word, and then read it out loud to make sure of two things. First of all, that it makes sense. And second of all, that it sounds good to the ear. You have to read the speech out loud, and if you just use bullet points instead, that's fine, but you still have to read through it out loud. The out loud element is critical because it's going to be spoken out loud. And if there are words that hold you back, and these could be words in your own language or in a foreign language, change them. I was working with someone from China who was preparing his commencement address at Harvard. He was giving the Harvard student commencement address in front of 10,000 people. And he was a scientist, so he was talking about manipulating data. He couldn't say the word manipulate. He couldn't say it. It's a hard word. And so I know that if you struggle over the word in the beginning, you're going to struggle over the word in the end. It's not that if you hope it'll be better. So I said, is there another word that you can use? And he goes, control. Great, use that. Don't feel like you have to use certain words. The more comfortable you are in speaking, the more comfortable you're going to be on stage. So recognize you're in charge. Use language that feels comfortable to you. Use language that feels familiar to you. Then, once you know what you're going to say, and you can reorganize it once you've written it out, then you start to reduce it to bullet points. So I might start having it written out, then I reduce it to bullet points. And then I practice from those bullet points. And I bring bullet points with me to every single speech right here. I may not look at them, but I know they're here. Because a lot of people get nervous because they look out and see too many faces, and they forget to breathe, and their mind goes blank. And so if you
collapse.
and you don't collapse, you think you're going to, but we very rarely collapse in those situations. We think we will, but you pause and breathe, look down at your notes, and then you speak. And that process becomes easier. I always have something written in front of me. I may not use it, but I know it's there. I don't have it written word for word. That's the writing process that I go through. Then I practice the speech. And there are a number of different ways in which you can practice. What are some different ways you can practice your speech?
Before the mirror.
In front of a mirror is my favorite way to practice because it's easy and you don't need anyone else and you can do it by yourself in any place in the world. You find a mirror and practice. You can read it to your children. Now you can read it to two types of audiences. You can read it to an audience that understands your target audience, and you can read it to an audience that doesn't. And there are benefits to both, because you can make sure it appeals to people even if they don't know what you're talking about. But it's also helpful to practice with someone who knows who the audience is, so that they can tell you. So if you're speaking to a Nigerian audience and you want to practice your speech, practice with someone who understands the Nigerian context, so they can say, oh, hold up, now you're sounding like an American. Change that. So you can help them guide you. What are some other ways you can practice?
I did practice with Robbie
We
yesterday.
practice together.
Yeah,
Mhm.
before. That was great. But if I do the mirror, I try the mirror, actually my nervousness like skyrockets.
So do it more and it'll get easier.
I like to as well, my colleagues, my friends.
Right.
American friends, Western friends.
How about
They
practice?
can play that.
They can point things out to you.
Yes.
Mhm. How about practicing with a smartphone?
Yeah.
I was gonna say a recorder.
Yes,
Yes.
recording it is very, very helpful. But you have to watch it back a couple of times at least.
Yeah.
Why is that? What are you looking at the first time you watch the video?
Your visual.
You're visual. You're like, do I really look like that? Does my hair look like that? Do my clothes look like that? That's not how I sound. What is that? You know, you start, the nitpickiness comes in where we start to become our own worst enemy. So we have to watch it a few times to get over that, and then watch it as someone else would see. You can watch the video and turn the volume off and look at your body language. Do you use your hands? Do you look like the message that you're talking about? Do you look happy? Do you look sad? Etc. Those are different things that you can do when you practice. So what I'd like to do right now is to give you, this is perfect, we're perfect on timing. I'm going to give you 10 minutes to take the story that you wrote yesterday and turn it into a speech.
So they wrote 2,
Okay,
but more so the one you wrote at the end.
yes. Take the story you wrote at the end, which I understand may have been a couple of paragraphs, maybe longer, but it sounds like it was written, it was meant to be written. What I want you to do is go through that and figure out if you were going to speak it, how would you speak it? Are there words that you need to change? What kind of gestures would you use? And we'll talk about hand gestures in a moment. And pay special attention to the beginning and the ends, which are the 2 most important parts of any speech. Why do you think?
So,
The beginning to attract the attention.
The beginning grabs people's attention,
Yeah.
makes them put down their phones and listen.
Yeah.
And why the end?
The message.
The final impression. First impression and the final impression. Most people end their speeches with, most people start their speeches with, so yeah. And they end their speeches the same way. So
yeah.
yeah. Because they don't know how to end. They don't know how to start. So pay special, you're nodding, you're nodding, I know you're agreeing.
No,
Pay
I
special
know.
attention. What's
Oh,
that
yeah.
first sentence that captures people's attention? And then the last sentence that drives home your message. So that when those people leave and go into an elevator with Margaret and she says, so what was their speech about? That last sentence is still sitting in their head. It could be a call to action. It could be a vision of the way the world will look after people implement your idea. I'm going to give you 10 minutes in silence to go through this exercise, and then you're going to practice that. If you need to stand up for a minute, you can do that. I'm planning on a 15-minute break after this writing exercise. But first, a question from Olga.
yeah, it's very simple. I didn't finish my second writing, but I did with the first one. May I use the first one?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Sure.
The second one, he just asked you to think about your mission and then to pick a story about that. But I remember you said that your first story applied to that. So
Could apply, but yeah, I didn't finish the second story, but the first story could apply a little.
Okay, good. So go through that in 10 minutes.
paper.